Well, it's very interesting that all these years working with the Ascended Masters, I never really felt the presence of the Buddha the way I do Saint Germain, the other Ascended Masters. And I prayed to him many times since I've begun studying Buddhism, which was actually 40, 50 years ago. It would be nice to actually have contact with the Buddha. And then it suddenly came to me yesterday that I did have contact with the Buddha. I was sitting right here drinking my coffee and looking at the picture of the Buddha behind me, and I heard, "You have had contact with me." And I thought, when was that? And then I remembered when I was in India, 1970-71, with Neem Karoli Baba and Ram Dass and that whole group, that I went to Bodh Gaya, which is where the Bodhi tree is that Buddha sat under and achieved enlightenment, so the story goes. And I thought that maybe I would feel closer to him there, or at least it was the ideal place to get Buddhist training. And I heard that Vipassana meditation was going to be taught there at this special Vihar, which is this ashram there in Bodh Gaya. So a group of us went. We were living on a houseboat in Benares, or Varanasi as it's called now. And so we all went there, got there at 4 o'clock in the morning, or 5 or so. It was freezing cold, and we huddled against the big gate. There was a huge wooden gate and a wall that went around the ashram. And I went in and arranged to take the Vipassana training. And before it began, first they served breakfast and had a nice big bowl of oats. And I had just a short time before the instruction was to begin, taught by Goenka. And I had to use the bathroom in the worst way, and I thought better go now than have to get up in the middle of the instruction. So I went into the building. It looked like a school classroom. There was a central corridor, and there were classrooms on either side, and it was dark. There were no lights on at all. And I walked, they told me the bathroom was at the very end on the right side, so I was walking down the corridor, and I looked into each classroom on the left and right as I walked down the hall, and they were all dark. It seemed I was the only one in the building. It was absolutely quiet. And I got to one classroom on the left, and as I went by, it was completely illuminated. And I went back, I stopped in my tracks, went back and looked in, and there were 4 people in there, all in orange Buddhist monk robes. There was one in the middle who had an aura around his head, like in the paintings of saints, a golden orb around his head, and that was the light that was illuminating the room. And the other 3 monks were deferring to him. They were one of them was touching his robe, and they were all bowed somewhat to him. And I was absolutely speechless. I thought he was going to be participating in the teaching, that maybe he was the one going to give the teaching. And I had never seen anybody like this, even the great saints that I met in the Himalayas that could precipitate objects, and it was like out of a movie. And I thought, this is the one I'm looking for. I want to be his student. And I wanted to go in and prostrate to him and say, please accept me as your student. But I thought, this is going to be a somewhat involved, lengthy procedure. I better go pee first. So I went down the hall, did what I had to do, came back in less than a minute, and they were all gone. The room was completely empty and dark. So I ran outside, looked all around, couldn't find these monks. So I went to the administration and I said, please, where are the monks that were just here? And they said, there are no monks here. This is only a class for Westerners. And I said, there were 4 monks here in orange robes. And they said, no, nobody like that has been here. And I said, well, look, I want to go outside and look for them. They said, the gate has been closed for the last hour. There is no way in or out. No one has been in or out of here in the last hour. And there was a gate. I mean, the ashram, the vihar, was completely enclosed. And there was, must have been 12-foot high wooden gate around at the front of the ashram. And so I just, it was mind-blowing that there was a being like that. And I had no idea who it was, and except inside I heard, this is a Buddha. You know, this is what a real Buddha would look like. You know, it was like the paintings. In fact, behind me, it's like that orb around him was what it was like, except it was gold and dazzlingly bright. And then I went in to receive the Vipassana instruction, and I got the basic instruction, and then something told me to leave, that I was not supposed to stay there for the entire 10 days, that I had the instruction, I needed to practice it on my own, just observing my breath, the in-breath and the out-breath. And that would lead to the mindfulness and the Buddha mind. And I blocked that whole episode out for the past 50 years or so, until talking with you the other day. That came back to me, and I remembered that experience. And I remember I had told people I for many years I never actually experienced the results of prayer, but I realize now, when I met Anandamayi Mai, first at her ashram, I had prayed that I would meet her someday alone out in the country, and a few weeks later I did meet her on the street, 3 times actually. And I had prayed that I would meet some of the great yogis of the Himalayas, and I did, and was blessed to live with them for a while and witness many miracles that they performed. And I prayed that I would have an experience of the Buddha if I went to Bodh Gaya. And I actually sat, before this happened, I sat under the Bodhi tree. I climbed over the fence around the tree and sat and meditated at the base of the Bodhi tree. And after a while, I felt a lot of energy coming toward me, and opened my eyes and I saw a whole crowd around, and I realized maybe they didn't, want me sitting there. So I climbed back over the fence, but at least I had the good fortune to meditate under that tree where Buddha sat. And then I had this experience of this being who was luminous. And as I was talking with you yesterday, he finally communicated to me and said, Peter, who do you think that was? That was me. And I said, well, what should I call you if I, think of you in meditation? I would like to feel closer to you. And he said, just call me Bud. And I just laughed. I thought, that is so funny. My experience is that the enlightened ones have a great sense of humor. And that's been my experience with Saint Germain. And I was glad to see Buddha had the same sense of humor. And when I meditated on it, why it's not just Bud, but what is the bud? It is the bud of the lotus. That each chakra has a bud in it, and when you meditate on that, the bud blossoms into the lotus blossom. So, bud or buddhi is awakened mind, and that is what makes you a Buddha, is when you have awakened mind or buddhi. So the bud is at the core of it, and when we meditate on that bud, it blossoms into the Buddha, and you become a Buddha.